Okay, this video is about what are the best ways to learn Spanish. And I'll go quick through, my story and how that relates to what you can learn. Of course, the best thing is to be born in the country and speak it from birth. And if you can't get that, then to travel the place or to have your parents speak to you from birth if you can get that. But you wouldn't be watching this if you had that deal already. So I'm going to show you some things that really work. I spent a long time trying to figure this out, and I figured it out. As usual, I figure stuff out after it's kind of late, but better late than never. This is a picture of my mother with me. I wrote a audiobook in Spanish, medical Spanish, for talking with patients, and at the time I thought it was a pretty good book. Looking back, I really wasn't as sophisticated as I thought I was in Spanish at that time, but it was still a good, fun thing with my mom. I got the Puerto Rican flag hat on at the time, and so anyways, I'll show you some more stuff that I think will be helpful to you if you're interested in Spanish. Okay, so first of all, you got to have your philosophy right. I talk to all kinds of people, and they kind of have this attitude. What do you need to tell me about philosophy for? I just want to get to what matters. And I'm like, look, I was like the best student in the United States, and I can tell you philosophy is essential. Great students, fast learners, tend to have the right philosophy. That's what works. Okay, if you want to learn Spanish, why does everybody in the United States practically stink at Spanish, even though everybody takes it in school? Because the school approach to Spanish is a joke. They focus on grammar books and grading grammar because that's easy for the teacher to grade. It's objective, but the truth is it's irrelevant. Okay, I know people who majored in Spanish in college and they still can't speak Spanish. They still can't read it. The key is to use the language. You don't study a language, you use the language. I mean, you study it too, but you have to use the language either to communicate. You want to talk to somebody, or you want to listen to music, you want to listen to an audiobook, or you want to read, ideally have conversations with people, but you have to use the language to learn it. That's how we learn English. Little kids in English, they don't even ever open a book. They just converse and try to use the language for their life, and that's how you get good. I wrote all about language learning in great detail in this book of mine called Straight A's at Stanford and On to Harvard, How to Learn Faster and Think Better. And, I was sort of obsessed with everything you could study about memorization and learning techniques. So it's all in there for somebody who wants that type of source. What else would I say is go to bilingual fairy tale books real quick. If you don't have somebody who you can converse with on a routine basis, bilingual fairy tales are a very fast way to rapidly improve your Spanish. Focus on acquiring vocabulary. You need vocabulary, and it doesn't really matter your pronunciation that much. You think about it, if you've raised children, they mispronounce all kinds of words, but you understand exactly what they're talking about, and with time, the pronunciation gets better. The key is understanding, and that comes from knowing the vocabulary and working on conversation. Because in a bilingual fairy tale book, you know the story already. You recognize the pictures. It's very high yield vocabulary, like a family and encountering one's friends. And it's just a fast way to acquire the language. So I would read the bilingual fairy tale books. One of my cousins came into town and he translated the book for me. And then, of course, you'd say, well, why didn't I just learn English as a baby? Well, back when I was born in the 1960s, everybody thought America was the greatest country in the world, and it was the greatest country in the world, and that there was no need to learn Spanish. And, all my cousins, speak English as well. So they didn't initially, my mom and dad didn't initially teach me Spanish, and then they tried to teach this to us when we were in preschool. But we didn't want to learn it. Kids, as soon as they can say no and run around with their friends or watch TV, they don't care about learning anything. Then in high school, I took it and I got all A's in it, but it was a joke. I just memorized what I had to for the test and then forgot everything. It wasn't until I went to med school and saw there were a lot of Spanish-speaking patients that I became interested in learning again. And I acquired some skill with Spanish and wrote that book about it, and that was kind of a fun little project. And my mom helped me record the audio version for it, but I didn't really get serious about Spanish until later. When my mother died, and I was very sad, and it was a way that I felt closer to my mother. That's kind of what drew me into really trying to absorb the Spanish language. And I went to a Berlitz tutor, and she was real nice. She kept telling me how well I'm doing and stuff, but then I said, how you doing to Puerto Rican guy at work, a friend of mine, and he said, "Jodido pero contento." And what he was basically saying, I didn't understand him because, I knew how to speak the formal, stupid stuff that's in the books, not have conversation with people. I didn't really have much opportunity for conversation. And so, joder is to screw, if you will, in the vulgar way, and pero contento, but I'm doing okay. So what he basically said is, I know I'm screwed in life, but I've accepted it, so now I'm fine. And I realized that, how could I really be doing well in Spanish when I couldn't even introduce myself to somebody, even though I could memorize and learn everything that was in the books. So I realized I was about ready to quit, but then I realized, no, I don't want to give this up. Obviously, other people can do it. I've seen illiterate people acquire second languages. They just use the language, whereas I was studying the language. And that's when it clicked for me that I got to use the language to communicate or to read, make that a goal. So then I had my cousin do the bilingual fairy tales for me, and I walked around with this little audio player with all these audiobooks recorded on here, and I would just sort of immerse myself, swim in them all day. Whenever I had a free moment, I'd be listening to Spanish language in familiar context, in context with all these stories, bilingual fairy tales. Then I went through all the self-help books, like How to Win Friends and Influence People, Brian Tracy stuff, all that. And then the big achievement for me that got me where I was happy with my Spanish level and I could really read most books was I read Da Vinci Code in Spanish. Here's all the vocabulary words. I don't know if you can see that. And then the Da Vinci Code had 16 audio CDs. So these are all the vocabulary words. I would write them all down in the front as I learned new ones. And once I went through Da Vinci Code, all 16 CDs, and I could understand, I was pretty happy with where my Spanish was at. That was the big secret, though. And Da Vinci Code, what was great about it is there's an English version of the book, there's a Spanish version of the book, and the audio CD version. And it's a very entertaining book, so I was quite absorbed in reading and absorbing the whole thing. Another lady who I liked, I thought she was really good, is Cato Loam. I then studied all the all the famous polyglots I could learn about. And she acquired multiple languages primarily through reading. She would just read a fiction novel that she really liked, and whatever words, the way she knew a word was important was she would keep seeing it repeatedly. And she was world famous as one of the best translators ever. And so the Cato Loam book here, it's called The Polyglot, is fantastic, How I Learned Languages. That was real influential to me because I read a lot then in other languages. And I've ended up studying other languages. I just didn't have enough ongoing usages for them. And I also have to work a lot, so I don't have all that time. Then I did something that was a lot of fun, and I'll talk more about this in a future lecture, but I really love Spanish music. Spanish music is great. The rhythm is great. The singing's great. I like it as much as English-speaking music. And also, Spanish is a lot more dramatic. Spanish language is better than English for anything about drama and emotion and love and prayer. It's just got a lot of energy in it. English is better for scientific, precise description of things quickly, more concise. So what I did here is I took all my favorite Spanish songs, and there's like 100 of them, and I got their translations online. Some of them I translated. I had a Spanish tutor at this time who also helped me translate some of these songs, and I translated all these songs from English into Spanish or Spanish into English. And I would listen to them all the time. I had them on my little recorder, so I'd listen to them all. You don't learn as much vocabulary from a song. And I would especially emphasize singers like Juanes, for example, who have clear diction. You can understand all the words. You're not going to learn Spanish from listening to Daddy Yankee or something like that. So anyways, this was a lot of fun, and it helped me to get the emotional style of speech. And so I had a good time with that. I wish I could use it more. I wish I had more opportunity to use Spanish in my life. I don't have that much, but that was the most important thing to get out of this talk is that you have to use the language, develop your vocabulary, and either read in the language or communicate in it, and then you'll have lasting skill. And the grammar is just a secondary minor thing. Just like you didn't use much grammar to learn English. You look stuff up and that helps you here and there, but it's not the big deal. And I'll tell you, the Spanish music stuff, it's very joyful. It's great. I love Spanish music. You'll find a lot of enjoyment in that. And it gives you more variety. It's just as good as English music. You'll be amazed at how good it is if you don't have experience with it. Let's see if there's anything else to cover. We talked about the bilingual fairy tales. Okay. Conversation's a lot easier when you're talking to somebody face to face who's sympathetic to you and wants to help you, and they slow down. They can tell when you need a little definition given to you versus, on the phone or listen to the radio when they're going fast and, they have no attention to your level and what you understand. The audio CDs in the car were real helpful. I try to live in the other language. I would set my browser in the other language. I would do everything I could in the other language. I would count everything I did in the other language. All these little habits help with the acquisition of the language. Okay, and then studying the famous polyglots. So anyways, I hope that was fun, and the idea of bilingual songs, Da Vinci Code, and the Cato Loam method, and walking around with this, all these things are helpful, so hope that helps.